everyone, here is Lexi, and today I would like to share with you my thoughts and experience of reading this Song of Ice and Fire series, also known as the Game of Thrones. This isn't going to be a detailed book review, because there is literally so much to cover and I'll be sitting here forever. So instead, I will talk with you about the reason why I decided to read the series in 2024, and whether you should start reading it too, even though it is not finished. Whether you're a longtime fan or just considering picking up the books for the first time, I hope you stick longer and will enjoy this journey with me. Back in 2019, when everyone was so hyped about the last season, I was only 15, and I remember hearing people mention that the show contains a lot of explicit scenes. It made me feel cautious about getting involved into this story. Even though there were dragons and battles, and I'm a huge fan of fantasy, I hesitated because of the mature content. I was curious, but when my mom, who had watched the show, told me now wouldn't be the right time for you to do that, I took that advice seriously. Looking back, I realize now why waiting was the right call. The series involves intense themes like violence, seductions, treachery, political system with complex details, and it can be hard for a young mind to grasp. At that time, I had this feeling that I wouldn't be able to process all that. So I decided to wait until I was mature enough to handle it all. Last year, after I had finished another fantasy series, I found myself thinking about the Game of Thrones. I thought maybe it was the right time to read the books instead of watching the show. And it turned out to be just the perfect choice. Let me explain why. As a young girl, an innocent maiden, so to speak, encountering the sexuality the way it is portrayed in the series could have impacted me in the wrong way of how I see these topics. Now that I have grown up and got married and, so to speak, developed my own healthy experience of the subject matter, I was able to calmly engage with the material the way it is portrayed in the series, which is also a key part of the plot. There is also something that I gotta say. I didn't read the Game of Thrones in traditional sense. I listened to it. Once I discovered David's A Song of Ice and Fire YouTube channel, I was hooked. David calls himself an amateur reader, but the attention to detail, the voice acting, and the overall atmosphere he creates while reading is just beyond words. It's amazing. You can feel his love for the characters. All characters come to life with his voicing, and this is so rare to find these days. Listening to the story allowed me to combine my hobbies, such as digital drawing, with the narrative. After listening to each chapter, I would dive into the comment section to see feedback from other listeners, and it made me feel like a part of a community. I would see comments like, "Okay, Martin, you publish The Winds of Winter as soon as possible so that David can read this to me." And it's so sweet. This is the kind of connection and excitement that made the overall listening experience even richer. So I would recommend David's channel if you are considering listening to the books. It was such an incredible experience of traveling through Westeros with his voice. Now, we all know the series is unfinished, so I see that many people recommend avoiding the books to avoid disappointment, so to speak. I want to share my perspective. I personally knew the series wasn't finished, so I was kind of mentally prepared for that, which is different from all those fans who been reading the books since the very beginning and are still awaiting the 6th book, The Winds of Winter. Is that sad? Yes, the books and on a cliffhanger, and I have mixed feelings. I've been so hooked on the characters, their journey, their transformations, and now I just gotta say goodbye to them, which is kind of heartbreaking. If you find yourself in a similar situation, here's a message that I need to convey. Hey. I have noticed that I sometimes don't finish long series on purpose. It is as if I don't want the story to come to an end. It reminds me of a quote by a Serbian writer, Milorad Pavic. If you happen to not finish this book, don't be upset. It won't harm the book much. After all, an unfinished book is like a life without death. So, in some way, all the characters are continuing to exist in my inner world, and their stories are continuing to go on. I find peace in that idea. Just think about it this way. Daenerys, Drogon, and Khal Draco have been staring at each other for the last 13 years, and the war at Meereen is yet to begin. And despite everything, I still hold on to the idea that the Winds of Winter is on its way. I can't exactly put my finger around why I feel this way, but probably because of some recent interviews with George R.R. Martin. They seem to indicate that he's been actively working on the book and not completely abandoning the story. Just try to imagine the intense pressure he must feel after the TV show finished his story for him. Now, with all the expectations from the numerous fans, the stakes on The Winds of Winter are incredibly high. There is a theory that resonates with me that George Martin may publish the book after his death. Given that so many people have their own idea and vision of how the story should end, upon the release of Winds of Winter, he would get a lot of criticism in any way. However, if he were to publish The Winds of Winter posthumously, that would free him from all the expectations and the book would be received with much more appreciation. Anyway, let's not give up hope. When the book does come out, it promises to be a blast, and I'm excited to see how he wraps up the story. This video doesn't aim to be a comprehensive review. I'm not going to dive into the intricate details of each book. I will instead share my personal experience and tell you how it made me feel. I often hear people say that George Martin's writing is unique, one of a kind. And I gotta admit that, yeah, from the very first chapter, I never felt bored or caught myself wondering, come on, what's next? Martin has a remarkable way of surprising us with different story twists. I also love the vastness of the universe he created. His world building is incredibly detailed and includes so many side characters. I sometimes struggled to keep up with all the names of the NPCs. And he never overlooks the nuances of their stories. I particularly enjoyed the narration in point of view chapters. I get to experience the story from different perspectives. I can be in different characters' shoes and see how they perceive what's going on. He writes about children, women, knights, and kings exceptionally well, and that makes it so easy to connect with whichever character's chapter I'm reading. Another thing is that as a young person, I found it fascinating how George Martin addresses the issues of our modern world and society through his fantasy stories. The series explores timeless themes of freedom, honor, power, lust, greed, and love, reflecting on the complexities of human society. So I resonated with each chapter on a personal level and could see how those issues are also relatable to the world that we are actually living in. The Song of Ice and Fire series is something that cannot be compared to anything else that I read before. It is simply on a different scale and legendary. So I'm telling that every respected fantasy lover or book reader should read the Game of Thrones. It was a roller coaster of emotions and a deep journey. Those characters, their stories will stay in my heart forever, and I hope we'll have a reunion someday. Like this video and leave a comment if you have read the books or if you are just considering starting, and let me know what you think about it all. Bye!